Hey guys, I'm Jackie Brubaker, host of the Love You Even More podcast. I'm an author, performer, producer, and Emmy Award winner. Each week, I bring on inspiring people and experts in their field to have powerful, motivational, and enlightened conversations about relationships, self-development, and how you can love yourself even more. Follow us for daily updates at Love You Even More podcast and at Jackie Brubaker on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. For more on myself and the podcast, including ways that you can love yourself even more, go to loveyouevenmore.com. Welcome, Chris Racliffe, to the Love You Even More podcast. Chris has been on before. We talked about anxious attachment styles, and today we're going to talk about the anxious avoidant attachment relationship. This is a biggie. This is happening all over the place. People are very interested in the relationship they're in because it's probably that, and they want answers, and Chris has the answers. So welcome back to the podcast, Chris.
all good. It's easy to slip that up.
Oh my God, it was like a mix of your two names.
I know, and I've heard that throughout my life. So it's not uncommon. It's something the brain does. Don't even worry about it. But it's so good to be back. I'm so excited to unpack this topic for folks today, because I know folks listening have likely been in a relationship of this nature before.
Or in it right now, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So maybe it might be best for us to start by just explaining maybe some of the differences between the anxious and the avoidant attachment style and why they kind of gravitate to each other, because ultimately they affirm the core beliefs of the other person. And I'll unpack what that means in a little bit. So I like to think of attachment as a spectrum from insecure to secure. And many of us fall somewhere in the middle. No one's 100% secure or 100% insecure. You can function that way. And no one is, of course, perfectly healed and goes without moments of disconnection or trauma, right? So that said, I want folks listening to know that these are styles. And at any given time and with different experiences, you might be growing more secure and you might be growing less secure.
Ooh,
on the less secure. Well, yeah, I mean, look, we are very flexible, very resilient beings as humans. And our experiences shape our impressions, both in our body and our nervous system and our mind. And we come to expect that the future will resemble the past. So the more that you've experienced disconnection, neglect, abuse, trauma, being cheated on, having people be inconsistent with you, or just having unstable experiences, like not knowing where you stand with the people in your life, of course, your system, which is wired for safety, wired for belonging, wired for social connection, would naturally start to protect against that.
Absolutely.
So that's what attachment styles are on the insecure side of things. So they are adaptations. They are forms of protection. They are styles of trying to get emotional needs met. Really, another way of looking at it is they're kind of clusters of coping mechanisms. And as you go to the insecure side of the attachment spectrum, you have two kind of different wings here. There's one wing or one approach that involves leaning in, of trying to work or achieve for a sense of love. And this is the anxious approach to things. This is a natural adaptation for having folks, again, be unstable and inconsistent throughout your life, and for having been hurt and experienced disconnection, which is deeply painful. Disconnection and trauma are the same thing, just explained differently, using different words. And that adaptation is, again, all about leaning in. So the approach is, in order to get my emotional needs met, I'm going to do all the work. A lot of times to their own detriment and to the sacrifice of their own emotional needs. So I will meet all of your needs in order to ensure you do not leave me, that I don't get abandoned or cheated on or left, so that I don't have to be alone. Abandonment is a big part of the anxious adaptation. It is oftentimes why we have experienced disconnection. And I want to remind folks that trauma is always about the interpretation of the person who has experienced it. It might not have been the intended consequence of the person who traumatized you. Okay. And this is why parents aren't necessarily to blame for your trauma, unless, of course, you're talking about active abuse, neglect, really serious mistreatment.
Right.
But it's always about the interpretation. How do we interpret it? What does it mean to us? And the interpretation for the anxious person is, I'm going to get left. I have to do the work to ensure that I belong here and that I am safe. And so that's the adaptation. For the avoidant, it is the complete opposite approach. So their style, their adaptation revolves around shutting down, disengaging, having a very strong sense of self, learning to rely only on themselves, because they learned that relying on other people means I get hurt. And on top of that, that hurt tends to be derived and come from experiences of enmeshment or people really grasping onto me and trying to control me and manipulate me by being kind of deceptive or passive aggressive oftentimes. So they learn to disengage. They're naturally skeptical about you. They don't feel like they really need to be in relationships. They tend to spread their investment out over a wide variety of connections. And they will also engage in deactivating strategies of their emotional system, of the limbic system, as well as the attachment system, which are related. And this looks like things like throwing themselves into work, right? So avoidants tend to be very busy people. They've got a lot going on with their social calendar. They've got a lot going on at work. And oftentimes will use that as an excuse for why they shouldn't pursue the relationship.
Sure.
They also engage in a lot of substance abuse oftentimes. So they'll rely on things like alcohol or other substances or drugs to numb themselves and their emotions. It's a deactivating strategy. It's a way to try to disengage emotionally. And they will also use sex for the same purpose. And they tend to really, it's ironic because they don't like being controlled, but they tend to be the one in control. They're controlling how much time you get with them. They're controlling whether or not they're physically intimate with you. And so you can see why these are very different approaches. They are complete opposite strategies for trying to get emotional needs met. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons they come together is, as I mentioned earlier, they affirm the core beliefs of the other. So they don't know this. It's not something they do intentionally. But the anxious person, their core beliefs are, I'm not going to meet someone who wants the kind of depth of connection that I do. I always get left. I never, I should have seen it coming. I'm beating myself up and guilting myself for not being able to anticipate the fact that this person was emotionally unavailable. Here we go again. And on the other side of things, the avoidant person is having their belief of, I always get controlled. I always get manipulated. The way I show up in a relationship is never good enough. So why do I even try? And you can see why the overreaching from the anxious side of things and the overly emotional approach, the check-ins, are we good? Why are you taking so much space? That's the avoidance strategy for getting back to baseline. Mm-hmm. The anxious strategy is leaning in, and avoidant is leaning out. Mm-hmm. So they confirm their beliefs about each other. The anxious person often behaves in protest behavior, indirect, passive aggressive, or sometimes straight up aggressive ways of trying to get emotional needs met, because they have repressed the expression of those needs to the point of lashing out, growing resentful, shutting down or withdrawing completely. Well, if you're not going to respond to my text in 6 hours, I'll take 6 days. Okay, I'll show you. On the avoidance side of things, they will interpret that as manipulative, because it is in a lot of ways. And that makes them shut down even more, which then creates this cycle of disengagement, the anxious person not knowing, oh my goodness, well, maybe this person just needs space. Let me honor that. And then a lot of time goes by. They're not expressing their need from a place of inclusion and saying, look, I totally respect your need for space. That's really healthy in a relationship. And I want you to know I value that too. Would you mind letting me know if you'd be able to check in maybe a couple of days from now so I can manage my expectations and know where I stand with you? Very inclusive language is good. Effectively communicating is essential for breaking this pattern, as is learning not to personalize the strategy of the other partner. It's so often the case that the anxious person is judging the avoidant. Oh, well, you're emotionally unavailable. You need to work on yourself. It's exactly what the avoidant does to the anxious person. You're needy. You can't be in a relationship right now. You need to work on yourself. So they end up forgetting that they're on the same team, that they want the same thing. And they start building their walls ever taller. They start criticizing. The relationship loses the spark, the connection, the warmth that so often defines the beginning stages of the anxious avoidant relationship. And both of them desperately try to get back to it, but fail oftentimes.
I think that is so crucial. Let's really dig into that, because even if you're not in an anxious attachment relationship, forgetting that you're on the same team is so, so crucial to keeping love alive and keeping moving forward. So I think I can hear a lot of people in my head saying right now, okay, so how do avoidants even get into relationships? And while this anxious attachment person may seem very intriguing and like lovely, the avoidant's like, well, maybe I'll take a shot. Is that how that happens with avoidance? Are they just like, well, that person seems super cool and not needy right now? Like what is it that actually gets an avoidant who is super busy and doing their thing and like doesn't need anyone to actually take the bait?
Because of the hurtful relationships that each of them have been in, where their needs really haven't been met because they've been in this kind of push-pull dynamic and oftentimes learned that their needs can't get met and maybe don't matter, they over-idealize future partners. So they think, oh, this has got to be the one. This is the one to break this pattern. Without realizing that we tend to recreate emotional experiences just by sheer nature of the way our nervous system works. We seek out what is familiar. The nervous system will always seek out a familiar hell versus an unfamiliar heaven because it knows what to do with it. That predictability, even though it means your needs won't get met inherently, is manageable because you've been there before. This over here, this space of someone being available, someone being willing, someone really wanting what you want, tends to really turn both folks off.
Yep.
Because it's not familiar and they haven't had experiences that have confirmed the fact that they can have that kind of depth of connection. In order to break out of the pattern, both need to learn to grow a little bit more secure. It doesn't take much. Just shifting maybe one or two intervals on the attachment spectrum gets you there. And that's the hope that I want to inspire everyone with. Building in more warmth, letting go of some of the criticism, some of the protest behavior, some of the judgment or manipulation tactics works. Even if you're not showing up perfectly, if you can more often than not try to speak from a space of inclusion to, if you're going to keep a score, keep an accurate score of your partner and how they're showing up for you and the ways in which they are meeting your needs or are speaking your love languages, instead of being so insularly focused on the moments of disconnection, the moments of detachment from the avoidant, because that's pretty painful for the anxious person, and learning to recognize that space is not the enemy. There is no rush to intimacy, and that allowing each of you to breathe and to know that oftentimes it is the intensity that gets the avoidant to the space of disengaging and shutting down, and realizing that intensity is not sustainable over the long haul of a relationship is very important. And then you can start to settle back into more of a space of stability, predictability, warmth, inclusion, and learning for the anxious person to lean a little bit out of the relationship, to not make it the center of your world, to know that that person is there. And we can actually learn a good amount from the avoidant. We can stand to diversify our sources of connection a lot more.
Absolutely. I feel like both sides have so much to learn from the other person. The avoidant has so much to learn about actually having intimacy and being close and connected to someone, and
Oh, yeah.
finally learning trust, and that they can be vulnerable and that they can speak up and that they can actually have a relationship. And then the anxious can, like what you were just saying, just lean back a little bit, find some autonomy. Like, what do they like to do? What is their world consist of minus their partner? It doesn't have, that's what's so interesting too, is that, the older we get, I feel like the less we kind of need our partners around for everything. I mean, I certainly do. There's never a time where I'm like, oh, I really wish you were here. I'm like, okay, we're good. Life keeps moving.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful place to be, because for me, at least, and this is just personally saying, it makes me feel like, well, I have a really strong connection because I don't feel the need for him to be here at all times. Like, if it works out great, and if it doesn't, that's fine too. Like, we're separate humans that decide to share
Yeah.
life. Let's give some scenarios, because I think this is great. And people are like, I want to do this. I can do this. I want to have this. Let's give scenarios that are challenging for the anxious attachment and the avoidant attachment in relationship that come up quite often, like a good, however many you want to come up with. But let's start with some of those so that people are like, oh, that I've been there. I have so been there, and what they can do on both sides to help.
Number one trigger for the anxious person is around communication and availability. So the number one thing I hear about from my clients who have an anxious attachment style is, well, I'm not hearing back via text. He's taking hours to get back to me, or they're taking hours to get back to me. And I always remind them that it's important not to jump to conclusions around what's happening on the other side of the screen, because you don't know. And it's also important in order to make that dynamic work, for the avoidant to understand that they can lean in a little more and not get criticized or judged, because they've been blown up on so much in the past that they just shut down, and they've learned to be really guarded with their communication. Mm-hmm. So that's number one. If you're not hearing back from someone via text, if they're not calling you or communicating as much as you would like, it does not mean that they are not a good fit partner for you. It does not mean that they don't care about you. It is important to talk about ways of getting your need for communication met that work for both of you. So maybe they're not a big texter. Maybe, again, they've been blown up on via text, and they've had other people jump to conclusions around their lack of availability, and that's only reinforced that unavailability. Wanting communication is not a bad thing. It's literally one of the main things that makes a relationship work. Mm-hmm. So it is important to navigate that from a space of inclusion. And again, being team members together, jointly coming to the table to talk about how to make it work for each of you, to compromise and to say, okay, well, I totally understand if you can't text at work because you have to leave your phone in your locker, or you put your phone on do not disturb because you're in and out of meetings all day. It's not about the quantity for me. It's about the quality. It's more about understanding that you're thinking of me and that you can't wait to see me, or you miss me, or you're looking forward to when you're going to see me next. A little bit goes a long way. The avoidant hearing that from the anxious is really powerful. And the anxious person learning to be able to communicate that from a place of inclusion and from a space of trying to build this platform, this foundation of a sense of safety. Like, we're in this together. Let's navigate this. Let's figure it out. Okay, so what? You're not a big texter. Okay. Are you a phone call person? What might that look like? Would you be amenable to talking on the phone for 3 to 5 minutes a day? I don't need much, but just to check in every now and again. And then the anxious person has more predictability, so they can relax a little more. And the avoidant person isn't having to have big, draining check ins all the time about where the relationship is going and how they're feeling.
Yeah.
And so it just creates more of a space of safety and intimacy and inclusion. Again, working together to recognize communication is a valid need to want to fulfill in a relationship, but it's how we go about trying to meet those needs that can be really unhealthy. You know, again, the keeping score, the withdrawing, the lashing out, the automatic judgment of the other person, it's not healthy.
Mm-hmm. And it's going to keep you guys separate. It's going to keep both of you out of relationships. And then eventually each one is going to be like, I don't need a relationship. I don't want to do this anymore. And then they're alone, which is not usually what most people want.
Exactly.
I would also like to put this word in here because this is so true. Consistency for an attached or for anxious is so big. And that's essentially what you were saying. But just like for instance, my boyfriend and I are like, we're long distance. We're in 2 separate states, but we see each other every other week. So everything is very scheduled, including our phone calls. So like we have a morning and a night phone call. Sometimes they last for an hour. Sometimes they are 3 minutes long. It's really just about knowing, you know, I'm going to get a phone call in the morning and sometime in the afternoon, evening, and it's all good. And like some days, like we'll just talk a bunch just because different things are happening. And then like, there's no phone call at night. And I'm like, why would we need one? You know? And like, that's where it comes from of like, it's fine. You're getting the check-ins, you're getting the attention so that you know everything is okay. But I was kind of thinking about, you know, if you had a very like severe anxious attachment and you didn't get that phone call at night, like what might you think, you know, like, oh my gosh, and by the way, I feel nothing like this, but like, oh, we're in different states. Like, are they cheating on me? That's a whole other subject. That's a whole other podcast, but like having that consistency and trusting and all of that. Okay. What is the second?
Beautifully put, by the way.
Thank you. What is the second most important kind of issue that comes up?
Aside from communication, I think for folks in an anxious avoidant dynamic, the biggest blockage I see to having the kind of fulfilling relationship that you really want is that sense of a shared space of intimacy and safety. So because of the strategies that each of them have relationally, they're again reinforcing core wounds of each other and creating more disengagement. So in order to actually grow through this, and it is possible, I've seen it dozens, if not hundreds of times now doing this work. I want to share a metaphor that I share with folks all the time to try to understand the differences in approach here. I'll use a car to demonstrate this. The anxious person I liken to the gas pedal. We're pedal to the metal as quick as we can get to intimacy. And these are activating strategies for building closeness, the better. So we are, let's get to defining this relationship, to getting married, to getting there as quick as possible. We're the gas pedal. The avoidant person is the brake. So they're, again, naturally skeptical. They're naturally like, whoa, slow down. Let's slow this down. And they do so almost to the point of the car not being able to get anywhere. You can see why, if you're pedal to the metal, the car is going to crash and burn. And this is why many anxious attachers have experienced very short situationships that go through that spark, that intensity I was talking about earlier, and then fizzle out really just as fast. Same with avoidance, but they are really so disengaged, leaned out, that the relationship doesn't have a chance to really thrive or develop. You can't build a sense of safety with someone who's not communicating with you. Those are the extremes, okay, of each attachment style, but they help us to understand the adaptations that they've developed. In growing more secure, in building a more safe, inclusive, intimate, consistent dynamic, you need both to operate a car. You need a gas pedal, you need the brake. It's not about one or the other. It's about learning how and when to use both appropriately to get to your destination. and to learn that the car itself, the trip itself, is the journey, is the process, is the relationship. It's not about, getting to the finish line or what have you. It's about enjoying the companion next to you in the car. Right. And learning about pacing, learning about any blockages to intimacy, like when one person might be leaning more gas pedal or more brake, is really important. I also recommend for folks to talk about rules of engagement for how to disagree up front.
Ooh, and let's talk about that.
Yeah, because disagreeing, conflict, quote unquote, fighting, if you will, it's natural. I mean, you're talking about two, in this case, very different people coming together to try to integrate their realities and build a shared reality together. That's what a relationship is. In order to do that, we have to fight fairly, and we have to be able to disagree and not see it as a threat to the relationship. So many insecure attachers conflate conflict with abandonment and with criticism. That's what each, respectively, the anxious and the avoidant do. So if the avoidance being criticized, it brings up feelings of inadequacy. They're feeling, well, you don't even notice the ways I do show up. I do try. Why am I even bothering here? And they shut down even more. On the anxious side of things, we're trying to reinstate that period of bliss and heavenly, intensity that we experienced at the beginning, because we often seek enmeshment. We want the intensity because we've lacked closeness. So we're ravenous for it. That said, being able to say to one another, we're not going to raise our voice. We are by no means going to strike one another or be physically disagreeing. We will do our best to communicate with I statements, not you statements. And whatever works for that partnership. Every relationship's different. Some people really have their own unique triggers. Talking through it in an inclusive way is so powerful. So being able to understand the environment that your partner grew up in and why they might be triggered by certain things gives you the understanding. The more you can understand someone, the safer the connection becomes. Safety is about understanding. It's about seeing the other person and holding them, accepting them as they are. Marianne Williamson in A Return to Love famously said, "It is our failure to accept people exactly as they are that gives us pain in a relationship." So rules of engagement are ways of accepting someone as they are during moments of conflict, which can be very triggering. And also learning to, from the anxious side of things, pump the brakes, lean out of the relationship, grow more independent, learn to self-regulate, diversify our sources of connection. So leaning into friendships, connections with family, colleagues, and with ourselves, most importantly, is critical. For the avoidant, it's critical to lean a little bit more into the partnership with your romantic partner specifically. And instead of, because oftentimes avoidants will have very close relationships with friends, but not so much their partner. This is a way of guarding against experiencing too much emotional exposure or risk. Right. So they actually end up preventing the sense of safety that they crave. And rules of engagement, especially for conflict, help each of them to build more and more of a sense of warmth, more and more of a shared space where each of them can communicate where they're at without needing to take it personally. So this is the second biggest blockage that I see, is being able to navigate conflict situations, because so often they disagree about what to do for the relationship. So being able to acknowledge that they each have different approaches and doing their best to lean more into the middle. Again, for the anxious person, that means growing more independent. For the avoidant, that means growing more interdependent or reliant on their partner. And again, knowing that incremental, small increases in these different directions actually creates more of a compound effect. The sum is bigger than its parts. A little bit goes a long way for each person who has failed to experience being seen in those moments of disconnection.
Absolutely. What is a way that an anxious partner could ask their avoidant partner more about their past and more about what affects them trigger wise? Because I can just see an avoidant person being like, I don't want to talk about my past. I don't want to talk about this. How, I mean, I can imagine, you're picking up stuff as you go, but is there a way to sort of get in there in a respectful, gentle way?
I like to start with open-ended questions and drill down from there because it gives the conversation room to flow in the dance like nature that it needs to. It's an art form. It's not a science. It's not also not an interview. So you really want to demonstrate that you're hearing what they're saying. So I would start off with a very broad question like, how do you feel your last relationship went? See what they say. Ask them clarifying questions here and there. If they're not sharing a lot to begin with, maybe back off a little and approach the topic in a different way further down the line. Maybe even asking them, well, what made you feel most appreciated? Instead of focusing on the negative, also remind yourself you can focus on the positive. We all want more of what we want. And
Right.
yet, so few of us focus on asking about it, asking for it from a partner. We focus on what's missing. So we hone in on the negative and we reinforce the negative. And nobody likes hearing about that all the time. Well, you're not doing this, you're not doing this. Instead of shifting that a little bit and reframing it to, I'm actually hoping for a little bit more of this. This is what makes me feel more connected to you. And you're not doing anything wrong. I love when you do this, this, and this. So let's do more of that. Is there anything I can do that, makes you feel connected to me? That makes you feel like I see you and I hear you and I value you? What does that look like to you? Help me understand. The
Mm.
more you can speak in that way, the more disarming it is.
So,
And this is very important because anxious attachers are very indirect in how we ask for things. This irks the avoidant to no end. They hate it. They want you to be direct.
yeah.
They want you to straight up tell them what you want instead of bouncing around it. So get to the point too. Okay. You don't have to sugarcoat it, but you're going to frustrate them if you're just going round and round and round and not actually asking for what you want.
Absolutely. I will raise my hand to that. Okay. Big question, because I'm listening to you. I've taken the attachment, quiz so many different times. I am technically secure these days, very happy about it, very happy. Um, but I kind of lean in both directions. I became more avoidant as I got older because it's easier, but I was definitely more anxious when I was younger. So if you're in a relationship where you're kind of a blend, and again, I'm more secure. So like this is kind of stuff where it's like it's always there. It's always like, hey, we're here. It's a matter of like dealing with it when you're in it. But if you are kind of listening and you're hearing both sides, emanate for you, how do you do that in a relationship? Like how for you just personally do you kind of work in relationships?
I always like to remind folks that, again, these are adaptations, they're styles, they're not fixed. So there are times, situations, experiences, and even certain relationships where you might show up differently. And that's normal. Validating the fact that at different moments you might feel that you need to try to get your needs met in a different way is really validating. Reminding yourself that labels are limiting is very validating. As human beings, we're very complex, we're very nuanced. It's not as straightforward as just telling yourself, well, I'm anxious, so I need to do this. I'm avoidant, I need to do this. It's about recognizing when we might be behaving or adapting in one way versus the other and reminding ourselves that we don't want to do either of those approaches. We want to grow more secure. And to know that, again, small incremental changes add up very quickly. So it could be that maybe you're in a season of your life or a chapter of your life or a time at work, even where you're feeling super stressed out. Maybe you're not eating as well. Maybe you're not working out as much. You're not practicing as much self-care. It's natural. You're going to be thrown off. Your system, your body as a human being, it's all interconnected. So remembering that sometimes you just got to bring it back to the basics for yourself and start over. Start getting more sleep. Start hydrating more. Start eating a little bit healthier with each day. Seeking out any support for accountability that you might need with friends, family member, or a professional like a therapist or a coach. Very important. Knowing that you don't have to navigate life or growing more secure or healing trauma on your own. Very important. So knowing that, stripping all of this away, looking more at yourself from a holistic standpoint and from a very humanistic standpoint is very healing. Attachment styles are helpful in a directional manner. They can help you understand how you might be coping and why at a given time. That does not mean that they hold all the answers or that they are the end all be all. It is one way of understanding yourself based in a lot of research, a lot of science, which obviously solidifies its credibility. And it is powerful, but it's not the end all be all. It does not hold all of the answers. And taking a step back to see your humanity more holistically, understanding that the better you can take care of your mind, your body, and your spirit, the better off you will be, period. Getting the support that you might need to develop certain relational skills or to practice some of this stuff is also really important because time is precious. One of the reasons I got into being a coach for anxious attachers is I didn't want other people to suffer like I did for so many years. I didn't want them to waste years of their life doubting their worthiness, feeling a sense of shame, beating themselves up for feeling this way. And so that's why I got into doing this and developed a full-fledged program with worksheets and texting support and different group formats and all of this stuff, because I don't want to see people waste precious years going through exacerbating experience after exacerbating experience that just adds more salt to the original wound, just gives your system more and more data for thinking you can't have the kind of relationship or connection that you really crave so deeply. Mm-hmm. Get the help that you need. Even if it's not with me, I don't care. Seek it out. Get the support and work with someone that you feel really sees you. Healing is safety dependent. As I mentioned earlier, safety comes from being understood, seen, heard, and validated. This is oftentimes why folks who have worked with a therapist and made a good amount of progress, but still feel like there's a lot of work to go, come to me, and I get them. I can relate to them in ways that maybe their therapist cannot. Mm-hmm. Just by sheer nature that I have been there in the depths of despair. I know what it is like. I can remind them it is okay. It's normal that you're feeling this because it's such a disorienting, disillusioning experience that go through so many moments of disconnection and to be left again and again and not have the kind of relationship you want. So again, know that you got to seek out the support that you need. You must take intentional action to release the wounds, to actually put a salve on them instead of just expecting time to heal it all, as our culture has reinforced. It does not. So I want to remind people, look at yourself as a human, validate yourself. It's okay that you learned how to show up in relationships this way. If you learned it one way, you can unlearn it and learn a new way. I see it every day.
Oh, I love this. Tell people how they can find you. I mean, my God.
Thank you, Jackie. I appreciate it so much. So grateful for coming on the show for a second time. I could talk to you all day long. If you're listening to this and you're feeling seen and safe and like I get you, and you want to explore working with me, you can do so on my website at Crackliffe, CRACKLIFFE.com. It's my first initial for Chris and my last name, Racliffe, crackliffe.com/coaching. You can set up a free consultation there and we can explore what it would be like to work together. That's where I cover the specifics of, my support model and also get to know folks a lot better. So I know, the ways in which we need to focus specifically on your healing journey. I also published a book called It's Good to See Me Again. It's about my own emotional healing journey. I talk about all of the biggest moments of disconnection or trauma in my own life and how I learned to kind of embrace them, learn to come to terms with them, practice forgiveness, embrace change, be more spiritually minded, learn that I'm connected to something beyond my imagination. And you can find that on Amazon if you are interested. I don't talk about attachment styles per se, but I do talk about all the things that led to me developing my anxious attachment style. So there's definitely a lot of nuggets of truth and wisdom and some exercises in there that can be helpful as well. I also have a ton of free content on my TikTok. I have a community of incredibly powerful, supportive, encouraging folks there. That's almost 110,000 people strong at this point. And if you want to be seen by them and connect with them and also learn a lot about attachment theory and how to grow more secure, you can find me at Racliffe. Same as my website spelling Crackliffe or Cracklife with 2 Fs. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me there too, but I post less often.
And all of the links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much, Chris. This has been so helpful. I love having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jackie.
Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. Remember, sharing is caring. Make sure to rate the podcast and leave a review. We really rely on this to help get the podcast out there.